Phelios marks the Mega Drive debut of Namco, the arcade powerhouse responsible for Pac-Man and its myriad spin-offs and sequels. Phelios is an overhead shooter revolving around a story loosely based on Greek mythology. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, has been kidnapped by Typhon, the father of all monsters. You play as Apollo, god of the sun and Artemis' lover, blasting your way through 7 levels of ancient Greek horrors in order to save your princess. Never mind the fact that in Greek mythology Apollo and Artemis are actually siblings, and that Artemis hardly seems to fit the damsel in distress role she's been given in this game. It looks like she suffered the same fate as Athena in Sega's Altered Beast, going from a powerful woman in Greek mythology to a helpless princess in a Japanese action game. While the setting is a refreshing change from outer space, Phelios is still a pretty straightforward overhead shooter. Your arsenal consists of a sword which can fire standard projectiles or be charged up to fire a significantly more powerful shot. Along the way you can pick up options, which are drones that follow your path and fire when you do, as well as special weapons like homing shots, a boomerang type weapon that bounces around the screen, and a powerful beam weapon that fires in extremely rapid succession. Phelios is extremely difficult, to the point that I had to resort to some cheats just to capture footage past the second level. As this is a port of an arcade game from 1989, it seems as though it hasn't really been tuned for the home consoles. Phelios feels like it's made to eat quarters. Visually, the game is a pretty solid port. It's definitely not taxing the system, but there are some nice touches here and there. I especially like how some cinematics have been thrown in at the end of each level to keep the story moving along.
Apollo. I still remember. Vaguely.
Although it's pretty transparent that these really exist solely to get Artemis on screen in more and more skimpy outfits.
Apollo.
I also love the huge amount of digitized voices in the game, even though the Genesis hardware mangles them pretty badly. Phelios is significant more for what it represents, though. Mega Drive support from Japanese developers up to this point has been a bit thin, mostly consisting of publishers porting PC games over to the system. Namco, along with Taito, represent a different class of third-party publisher for the console. Publishers with strong roots in the arcade industry. Between them, they created 2 of the most important and successful arcade games of all time, Space Invaders and Pac-Man. But, unlike Taito, Namco had actually, up to this point, been heavily supporting Nintendo and their Famicom. However, Namco was also one of the first publishers to call out Nintendo on its draconian licensing limitations, something that a little later would bust the market wide open in North America. Remember, when the Famicom came on the scene in the mid-80s, Namco was a major force based on the popularity of Pac-Man. It was one of the first third-party publishers for the Famicom, and thus received a pretty sweet publishing deal where it got to manufacture its own cartridges. When Nintendo re-upped Namco's contract in the late 80s, the company found itself dealing with the same licensing restrictions as every other publisher. According to the story in David Sheff's book Game Over, Namco founder Masaya Nakamura was furious about the fact that he would no longer receive special treatment from Nintendo, and subsequently sued the console maker over monopolistic business practices. He also very publicly called out Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi and vowed that he would support Nintendo's rivals. Nakamura eventually withdrew the lawsuit and did further support Nintendo's consoles, though Sega's Mega Drive definitely seemed to get more Namco games. It's kind of ironic considering that Sega and Namco were about to become each other's biggest competition in the arcades, where they would release games in almost all the same genres. A rivalry which culminated in Namco eventually throwing its weight behind Sony and their PlayStation about 5 years later. By the way, you'll notice some of the early Namco games actually say Namcot on the cover. This was actually Namco's home division for a time. Namco is a contraction, standing for Nakamura Amusement Machine Manufacturing Company. Namcot is the abbreviation of Namco Home Entertainment.
Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays, kids more worried about